I constantly talk about Alcoholics Anonymous's severely dismal success rates, and their program should either be modified or go out of existence. And here's how they should change their program to gain much better results in recovery. In previous episodes, I have guided you, the newly sober, how to navigate the first 3 phases of recovery, how to walk the path of cure. Note, I said cure, not forever diseased like the proponents of AA philosophy state, who continue to indoctrinate its cult members that they are always and evermore an addict. I contend that one can become an addict again if he picks up the prior offending substance, but I boldly state at 2 years, the approximate time it takes for the neural programming to rebalance itself, one can claim cure once he has put this time past his last drop of friendship with John Barleycorn. Cult members, isn't that a little harsh, Charles? Not at all. Any program whose members feel they can never leave is a cult. Plain and simple. The AA members practically chant like the Moonies on the carpet. Work the program, follow the steps. Denial isn't a river in Egypt. It is absurd. That is the primary reason I don't recommend AA for recovery. Another reason is their mantra that the former addict will never recover but is always recovering. And their always recovering members have a dismal success rate, outside of one Stanford study whose sample of participants I highly question. But didn't I say in a previous episode regarding the first 3 stages of recovery that AA might be a good idea? Yes, I did. In the initial stages, the first 3 stages of recovery toward cure, I stated sitting in the rooms might be beneficial as long as you don't adopt their philosophy, because the cravings are at their worst in that first 30 to 45 days. The cravings get better with time, but if one feels he can't resist them, by all means sequester yourself until these phases pass. I also stated it might be beneficial to hear other stories that they rehash every night, so you can lock down in your brain that you were definitely an alcoholic. I also stated during the first 45 days, you might need a ton of coffee, sugar, and cigarettes just to get through this vicious period of insatiable cravings. But that's where I stop with AA. The problem is that the AA program should have been modified from the days almost 100 years ago when Bill W. initiated it. I understand why AA was such a refuge for alcoholic men of those days, because it was practically required for men to drink. Men drank at lunch, after work, and during all social activities. If one refused to drink, unless he was a town preacher, he might find his derriere handed to him outside of the pub doors. Jack London, in his memoir John Barleycorn, whom I reference on these episodes, reflects greatly that he may have had a better chance of beating his alcoholism if he wasn't practically forced to indulge at every corner of his walk. So it made sense that Bill and Bob's asylum seekers found their safe houses in the rooms every night. And no one even acknowledged female alcoholism back then, let alone held support groups. So men and women, knee-deep in drink, really only had one avenue of escape. I probably would have followed that route as well in those times. But this societal pressure to drink doesn't exist today. No one's going to threaten a fight outside if I don't share a pitcher with them. I can go to a party and drink my soda water with 2 limes, and basically no one cares. I can even tell them I used to be an alcoholic, and no one really cares about that as well. Programs of all ventures change with time. When I started bodybuilding with weights at 14, I had a Gold's Gym book as my guide, written in the early 1980s. They had professional bodybuilders engaged in exercises that we know today are terrible for the back and shoulders, so we modified these routines. In physical therapy decades ago, when a stroke victim came to the clinic, we taught them how to use their good leg and arm. In the 1970s, it occurred to my profession that stimulating the affected arm and leg actually promotes recovery. If I were to only facilitate the functional extremities today, other therapists would look at me like I was insane, and I would be for using those long, outdated techniques. And the methods of AA protocol today fit right in that insanity box. Those methods should have been altered. The fact that they have such a huge majority failure rate should have alerted someone in the rooms that things needed to change. First, the concept that going to AA meetings is for life should never have been a concept, unless you were living in Bill and Bob's era, and they probably thought their world would remain as so as we do today. But AA should have evolved to be a process, not a permanence. and that process should have been a weaning off at the 2-year mark of cure, not a continuance of constant recovery. During initial detox, the first 5 days of sobriety, I walked that path alone, and I thoroughly advise people not to do that. This would be the time to be under medical supervision. I made it, but I could have just as easily not. I also state that being in a facility that first 30 days following the initial hell of withdrawal would not be a bad idea. But even the rehab mentality itself should be altered. They can start by not telling people to look to the left and right of them, for that's how many in the line won't make it. There should be an initial rebuilding of the person's self-esteem, not an indoctrination that they have a disease, but that's really an addiction for whatever reason. And since the patients would have anti-anxiety medications, they could start to propagate a healthy dietary lifestyle right there immediately after acute withdrawal ended. But the sad fact is most people don't have the opportunity to sit in a facility for 30 days. AA is the only avenue that's presented to them. And if AA would adjust their program, they could have a much higher success rate of former addicts who are now cured. And here's how their program should be structured. They need to have separate meetings for those in second phase, that is to the 30 to 45 day mark, those under 6 months, and then those under 2 years. Someone comes out of acute phase, whether from a detox center or on their own, and they sign up for their group. Everyone in the group would share a commonality of lying in the same hammock. Sponsors would be a thing of the past. Instead, you have mentors, people from later stages to inform the recently sober of what to expect, role models, so to speak. They could even have a few of the successfully cured come in at times as well. During the second phase, 30 to 45 days after the last drop, the participants would have access to all the coffee, cigarettes, and cookies needed to make it through those horrendous cravings that are almost continuous in that first month and a half. This group in AA would be telling their past story a lot, so they get that they were indeed addicted to John Barleycorn's liquid friendship. And they all have the camaraderie of living in this neighborhood a few blocks from their former hell of acute withdrawal, left behind only shortly ago. And yes, they should be in the rooms every night, as they won't be in the mood to go to the gym or yoga studio in this phase. This would be an immersion phase, the first level in AA recovery to cure. When the newly sober hits day 45 from the last drop, he ejects into the next group, the month and a half to 6 month phase. First thing that happens is the meeting frequency drops from every night to 3 times a week. This is the transition group, from one of unhealthy dietary practice to clean intake and the beginnings of physical fitness. This is why this level only meets 3 times a week, because they're engaged in cardio work and other physical activities on the other days. Largely, this is a monitoring phase, with mentorship continuing from people from the next level or 2-year cure mark. Smoking is forbidden in these meetings, as well as caffeine and sugar, replaced by plates of donor vegetables and fruits. And like phase 1, everyone's going through the same. At this level, instead of telling your past story, counselors are brought in to find the root cause of why you began your addiction. And many times, that's going to go back to trauma in youth. Once you recognize the why, you can resolve it internally, in lieu of talking every night about how you woke up in jail or in someone's barn during your drinking binges. Also, you're developing drafts of the reinvention of self, as I say in one of my guidebooks, a written structural step-by-step plan on rebuilding the physical self, the emotional sphere, advancing your career, and determining your spiritual place in the universe. There will be weekly updates in the circle on how all participants at this level were progressing. The rooms at this point would just be checkups through the week. Strategies would be updated on coping for the still emotional lows as well as the cravings, and everyone at this level keeps moving forward. At 6 months, the ex-alcoholic would advance to the longest but final level, to the 2-year mark of cure. Meetings are now once or twice a month. Progression charts on self-improvement are discussed in the circle. Everyone shares how they're progressing at work or even changing careers. Life goals are reviewed. From this point, some may go volunteer to periodically speak at the lower level meetings of the more newly sober. For I do agree with the reaching back concept of AA. But at this point, the meetings are minimal and less frequent checkups of this reinvention of all of your planes. After that, it's just rinse and repeat all the way to that last day of year 2. At the end of year 2, former addicts graduate the program. The final chip is one given that has the word cured etched into the coin. The former addict simply does nothing but continue his progression in life and maintain that initial contract uttered on day one of never again. If AA were to adopt this type of protocol, they would see their success rates dramatically improve. It's already been proven. The group Passages does not adhere to the AA protocol, but holistically intervenes with the former alcoholic. They use much of the philosophy I just described, and they have a huge success rate. But what does AA do? They continue the same madness with the same dismal outcomes. Their participants live unhealthy lifestyles, smoking, guzzling coffee, and consuming sugar at every meeting. They don't exercise because their off hours are in the rooms most of the time. Whether at year 1 or year 20, Carolyn Knapp, one of their pundits for her written memoir, Drinking, a Love Story, did stay sober. She died years later from lung cancer from smoking. Well done, AA. Emotionally, you destroy your inductees. You tell them they're forever an addict, which is awesome for their self-esteem. You will mention that relapse is part of recovery. Also awesome. You have them living in a cauldron of boiling negativity as everyone tells their story of their screwed up past over and over again so they can never mentally leave it. And the very minority that actually stays sober, they never leave your rooms. They are afraid to leave your rooms. They are psychologically addicted to AA, which is now their new emotional drug. That minority that stays sober under your cult guidance, they may be sober. How you help them is a matter of great debate, for they are living in an emotional prison now, and that ward is Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a heavy late-stage alcoholic that was on the very edge of the abyss in my last drinking days, and I put together the program that has led to now over 16 years of sobriety. I am physically in tremendous shape even in my later 50s. I am still progressing my planes of existence, and I did it alone, but I'm offering a way for others to walk the same path I did. And the sad fact is, the second I mention to a longtime AA member to consider a better alternative, I get the cult snarl, because that is what AA has become. The protocol now defeats its own mission. Most who enter AA's doors fail in sobriety. Many will ask, why am I being so harsh? Why don't I just do what works for me and mind my own business? Because you, AA, are hurting the very people you claim to help. Whether they achieve sobriety or the majority who won't, you are robbing them of a chance of a reinvention of life with your methods that do not work for most. In the few others, you are stealing their lives. Non-12-step programs are starting to rise here and there, and they are gaining a success with even their few sites that AA can't match. I can only hope that eventually we will recognize that the current AA philosophy is nothing more than a broken machine that needs to be scrapped. So people in the grips of addiction will see that they can cross over the fence and live in the green pastures in which I exist today. Now, if you want some other reasons why AA is destructive for you, check out my playlist card at the end of the video, and check out my own detailed book on the matter, The Small Book, How I Beat Alcoholism and Why Alcoholics Anonymous Doesn't Work. Link is on the video description as well as the channel page banner. And remember, keep your contract. Be sober at sundown, and I will see you at the next sunrise.